Were you listening? I hope that you are not a part of the first tabernacle of the converted swineherds. That was a good one. I got to admit, I smiled back there listening to that. I thought that's a pretty good one. Good job, Roger, if you listen to this part of the video. We're in Mark chapter 8, verse 35. This is a special Sunday for me, and I hope that I can help to make it a special Sunday for you. Let me read this verse and then I'll get into my rabbit trail there. Mark chapter 8, verse 35. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. I think that's powerful words that Jesus spoke. Are you willing to lay down your life for him? I could kind of attach that a little bit to what Roger was saying. You can determine that you're just going to accept Christ and make him a part of your life. Or you can determine that you're going to totally sell out to what it is that he wants for you. It has challenged me in recent days as I think about the persecuted Christians and I think about what they go through and I think about what they lay on the line on a regular basis. For them to do what we are doing right now in this church could cause them to lose their lives immediately. And so suddenly going to church means something completely different. Because to us, we can do that in America right now. I think the days are coming, and probably not that far down the road, where we might be at risk for doing what we are doing. But right now, we can come into this church today, and I can say whatever I want to say. I may even make some of you mad at me. I certainly might make our government mad at me. And it doesn't make any difference. I can stand up here and do it without a single ounce of fear. In most of the planet today, in most of our planet today, that is not the case. If you dared to stand up and confess your Christianity, it could mean your life. And so it kind of changes the perspective. And I think to myself, have I missed something about being a Christian? I may get to a little bit more of that possibly today. Maybe I won't. This is an issue that I'm very passionate about. I've got several issues that I'm passionate about. You'll see that through the months ahead. I am very rabidly pro-life. I don't apologize for that. I am against abortion, and I stand on that firmly. I believe that homosexuality is still an abomination before God. And I believe that, now does that mean that I don't want to win the homosexuals? No, maybe you'll learn that about me later and how I've been involved in doing that through the years. And so I want to do that, but it's wrong. I'm a rabid creationist. I don't believe that the dinosaurs lived 6 million years ago. I believe the world is about 6,000 to 10,000 years old. And a lot of what you are taught by the so-called scientists is nothing but phoniness. Okay, so I've laid some things out on the line. I also, and I've showed you this before, it's getting too loose on me. I am very strong for the persecuted church. And I wear that bracelet as a reminder to me every single day to pray for those who are persecuted for their faith. See, I don't want to be judgmental, and I don't want to come across angry when I say those things of what I stand for. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings or make anybody feel bad. I just believe that the Word tells us this is truth. And I have nothing to stand up on but the truth. That's all I have. And so I don't say those things. Years ago, in the denomination that I was in back then, that I was ungraciously removed from, which we won't get into, but I helped to found the denomination magazine that our denomination put out. And my job was to write about the current events and situations that was going on in our world. And one of my articles was immediately rejected by the head editor because she said I was blaming the church for abortion. I wasn't blaming the church for abortion. I don't think the church is to blame for these things, but let me tell you what concerns me about the church. I believe that we should be praying about these issues. I believe that we should be praying, and it is our silence in the middle of these situations that causes me great concern. So I don't want you to walk away today saying, well, it's my fault that this has happened. And no, that's totally wrong. But what I am saying to you is, if we are silent, then we become complicit with what is going on. How did God say this? He said it in Obadiah chapter 1, verses 11 to 12. In the day that thou stoodest on the other side, in the day that the strangers carried away captive his horses, and foreigners entered into his gates and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou was as one of them. But thou shouldest not have looked on that day of thy brother in the day that he became a stranger, neither shouldest thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction, neither shouldest thou have spoken proudly in the day of distress. This is a word of God to Edom, which is Esau, the brother of Jacob, or Israel as his name would be changed to. And God is rebuking them very strongly because Israel has been taken captive. And Esau did nothing about it but stand by and basically mock the Israeli children for what they were going through. And the response of God is very, very strong to that attitude. The American church as a whole has stood by silent as our brothers and sisters in foreign lands have been decimated. They have been tortured and persecuted. In fact, there's more Christians dying now than what has ever been. Even on the days of when they fed them to the lions or burned them on the poles to light up their pathways. There is more of this going on, and the problem is not that the church is at fault in America. The problem is that we have been silent. And God said to Esau, the people of Esau, you were just like one of them that was coming in and taking Israel captive, because you stood by and said nothing and did nothing. So I'm not saying to us that we should be guilty over what has happened. It is not our fault. It is the fault of our enemy. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. There is an enemy named Satan that is out to steal, kill, and destroy. That is what he does. And it is his pathway that causes these things to happen. But I think, should we whisper a prayer? Should we whisper a prayer for the people in North Korea? The number one persecutor of the Christians around the globe is North Korea. They've been that for a number of years, and they put people into prison and don't even feed them. So a lot of times the people in those prisons are trying to catch rats so that they can keep from starving to death. And I think, should we At least whisper a prayer. When we have so much, we'll go over today, most of us, I hope all of us, will go over today and have fellowship in our fellowship area there, and we'll enjoy some good food. How do I know that it's good food? I don't know what we're having today. I don't know what has been provided, but I've been here now for some 5 months and still haven't had a single Sunday that I ate bad food. Every single time it has been good, and I have enjoyed it. Should I not stop and whisper a prayer for people that are catching rats so that they do not starve to death? We should realize that our nation took a country, Egypt, that was basically living in peace and turned them over to the Muslim Brotherhood so that thousands of Christians were slaughtered. We took Iraq and delivered them from a terrible dictator and then deserted them and turned them over to ISIS, where Christians were killed by the thousands. And the country was left with very, very little Christian influence in it. Should we whisper a prayer? Should we speak out about these things? Peter and Stephen and several others called the Israeli people out for being responsible for killing Jesus. They didn't hide it. We don't want to stand up to these things because it makes us unpopular. We don't want to be unpopular, do we? We want to be popular. We want everybody to love us. And so we won't say this. The apostles of old, the leaders in the church of old, stood up and spoke out about what these people had done and made it very, very clear. I think we need to do that in this day and age. Now I'm going to read a couple of things to you. This message is not going to be long. I'm going to read a couple of things to you. First, from Dennis Kinlaw in his devotional book that he wrote. And I'm going to mispronounce this place. I'm sure that I will. I was in Macao, a tiny colony off the China coast. I was there for a pastor's conference and was staying in the home of an American missionary couple. Toward the end of my stay, my host asked if I was interested in seeing the missionary Robert Morrison's grave. I was, so he took me to a Roman Catholic cemetery. I stood beside the grave, now weather-beaten and mossy, barely able to make out the name, date, and inscription, and I found myself uncharacteristically moved with emotion. Robert Morrison had been a young British man studying accounting when God saved him and called him to the mission field. What Roger was talking about, when God saves you, things change. Okay? When he arrived in China and the Chinese learned what his mission was, they booted him out. In those days, people who went to the mission field went for life. There was no such thing as furlough. So Robert went to Macao, a Portuguese colony. He stayed there a little while and then returned to China, but again was deported. So he found a job with the East India Company as an accountant. Periodically, he would travel into China only to be expelled each time. Morrison worked all day for the East India Company, which hated missionaries. And at night, he translated the Bible into Chinese. Eventually, he finished translating the Bible, and later he died in Macao. For days after his death, there was no agreement on where to bury his body. The Chinese certainly did not want a Christian to be buried in their cemetery, and the Roman Catholics were not about to have a Protestant buried in their cemetery. Finally, someone negotiated with the Roman Catholic Archbishop who sold one cemetery plot so they could bury Robert Morrison. He was rejected all of his life, and even rejected in death. Rarely do we recognize the cost that other people have paid to be faithful to the Lord Jesus. In our society, we focus so much on our own personal needs that few people will stand up and say, "Whatever God asks, I will do." Are you willing to do that? To say, "Whatever God asks, I will do." I have discovered how weak I have become. Do you ever find yourself whining about little things? Be honest. Don't raise your hand, but be honest with yourself. About whining about little things. I was doing that this morning. I was whining about little things. I hope that, Tisha, that you don't mind me sharing this about little Brooklyn. Little Brooklyn came in here, and I saw her about back where Tisha's sitting right now, noticing that I was up here. And her arms went out, and she came running up the steps and gave me a great big hug. I'm not very much of a hugger. I just don't do that. That's just not who I am, except for the little ones. The little ones can get by with what adults couldn't possibly get by with me. And I just stopped for a moment and I thought, my wife used to say that to me all the time. "Mike, why are you doing this? What are you doing, and why are you doing it?" And it's like, because of them? That's why. Does it make any difference that everything doesn't work the way that you want it to, or everything doesn't fit into place the way you want it to, or everything doesn't happen the way that you want it to? Why do you do this? I may have told you this story before. I don't remember doing it, and so I apologize if I'm repeating it. One day I was sitting out at breakfast out in Wilcox, Arizona, and I was sitting at the table and I was reading my daily prayer. That's part of my routine while I'm having breakfast, is reading my daily prayer force alert that you pray for the persecuted church. It was talking about the Iranian people that are Christians that are absolutely persecuted beyond imagination, and COVID hit, and all of this stuff was going bad, and these Christian people that had been persecuted by their neighbors in unthinkable ways took the little bit of supplies that they had and went out and gave it to the ones that was persecuting them. And I just sat at the table and tears were running down my face. I went home and I typed out on the computer what I had read. And I had several good Christian friends that said, "We are just turning off our computers now," trying to deal with this thought that people that were persecuted horribly stepped out in their faith and gave the little bit that they have. I haven't read any updates. I don't know what is happening with these missionaries that are in India that were kidnapped by these psychotics that is threatening to murder them if you don't pay them $1 million apiece. I think about these Christians in Afghanistan who our current administration sold out. And I think about these Christians in Afghanistan that say, "We know we're going to die, but we're staying anyway to present the message to the people that hate us." Should we whisper a prayer? I can't even get Christians in America to reach out to those who love them, let alone reaching out to the ones that hate them and want to kill them. Can you do it? Absolutely, you can reach out. But it's when Christianity comes more to be more than what you do on Sunday morning, coming and listening to me talk for a half hour, 40 minutes. And Christianity becomes your lifestyle to those around you. And sometimes I wonder why I don't see God do these major things, but maybe it's because I'm not giving him the opportunity to do these major things. So I read this story in Extreme Devotion from Voice of the Martyrs. Countless Christians in the Ukrainian town had already been sent away to Siberian labor camps because of their faith. Now it was Vera Yakovlevna's turn. The reputation of these camps was widely known, and she was certain she could never survive. When a guard found her witnessing for Christ, her punishment was to stand barefoot for hours on the ice. When she failed to meet her work quota, she was beaten and denied the watery broth that they called the evening meal. One evening, depressed and crying, Vera walked out into the prison yard to be alone. In her misery, she didn't notice that she had crossed into the forbidden zone, where prisoners were shot on sight. Suddenly, a harsh voice yelled, "Hey, is your mother a Christian?" Wouldn't that be an interesting question to hear? Is your mother a Christian? Well, you'll see why he said that here in a second. The stunned and frightened Vera, who had actually been thinking of her mother at the time, answered, "Why do you ask?" The guard said, "Because I have been watching you for 10 minutes, but I haven't been able to shoot you. I can't move my arm. It's very healthy. I have been moving it all day, so I figured you must have a mother who is praying for you. Run back and I will look the other way." Vera saw the guard the very next day. He smiled at her and raised his arm, saying, "Now I can move it again." We like to play it safe. We like the security over adventure. We prefer comfort to challenge. When it comes down to it, we want to safeguard our lives from as much doubt and fear as possible. Yet we have forgotten that God offers his protection at times when we are in the front lines in his service. God's protection is more like a shield in battle than like a security blanket for our comfort at home. When is the last time you stepped out in faith? So much that you simply had to rely on God's protection. Are you so busy safeguarding your life that you have forgotten how to trust God? Are you so cautious that you never take risks for God? Regardless of the outcome, a witness is not simply a risk. It is faith. It is faith. So do I have faith? Do you have faith? Do your neighbors know that you are a Christian? Do the people around you know that you are a Christian? Do the people that you hang out with, do they know you are a Christian? There's an old thing and that's not in my notes, it just popped into my head, which usually isn't a good thing for me to share those things, but there's an old thing that says, if you were arrested for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? That challenges me. I don't know if that challenges you or not. That challenges me because I look at myself and think, how do the people around me see me? These persecuted Christians whose very lives are on the line stand up and witness to their neighbors knowing that it might cost them their lives. And I just ask myself the question, if I'm really a Christian, should I at least be praying for them Should I at least just bow my head and whisper a prayer and say, God, protect them and use them and bring glory to your name through them? And then maybe I need to change that them to us and say, use me in the same way. 1 Peter 5:10, but the God of all grace, who hath called us unto his eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after that ye have suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, settle you. After you've suffered for a little while, I think all of us that are Christians suffer. Sometimes we suffer physically, sometimes we suffer emotionally, sometimes we suffer financially, sometimes we suffer. What other ways are there? But we should have a hope in our heart and a promise in our heart that God is preparing us, establishing us, settling us, and making us vessels for him. Do you even want to be a vessel for him? You'll have to decide that. I hope that you will pray for the persecuted Christians. Don't forget, they're going through a lot. Just because they're Christians, I hope you'll remember them. We're going to sing here if someone gets Gene's attention.